Welcome to another video by Pharos Technology. Today we're going to talk about building a search that allows the user to determine which fields they want to search and how many they want to search at once. So let's get started. The first thing to determine in our little project here is how many user elements we need to include. The first item is that they needed to have the ability to add more search boxes. When the user added search boxes that they no longer wanted, they needed the ability to remove those boxes. They needed also to be able to search any field from any search box. And they need also to be able to modify and repeat the searches quickly so they can perfect the data that they wanted. The only limitation to the number of search boxes was how many fields are available to be searched. The underlying search query with this form had 8 searchable fields, so I limited my effort to providing 8 search fields. In hindsight, I could have had only 6 fields as I used on the form, but I found that there was really not a feasible case study for a user to use all 8 at once. But we have 8, so let's move on. Let's see how I did it. So let's begin with adding search boxes. You can see in the picture that the Add Search Line button is in the middle of the top of the form. In the bottom, you see the design view of the same form, and you see that there's a lot of text boxes and combo boxes that are hidden from the user view. After several attempts at what we thought were more elegant ways to solve the problem, we determined that the most effective way was to create hidden search boxes that could be made visible when the user decided they needed more available search options. I'll create another video that shows the numerous bunny trails that my assistant and I worked through as we determined the option that we settled on. Once the combo box layout was complete, the task of making them visible each time the user just clicked on the Add Search Line button, that was easy. Since we wanted to have each search line appear one at a time, with each click of the Add Search Line button, it was easy to put together a little if-then statement to find out if the next search box in line was already visible or not. If it was not already visible, it would go ahead and make the text box and combo box visible. Then it would go to the label we called terminate so that the code execution stopped at that point. So it was a simple exercise of having multiple text boxes and then iterating through each one until we found the one that was still not visible, making that visible and then ending the code. So let's move on to removing the search boxes that I've used. In the example shown below, you see that 3 search boxes have been used for author last name, age range, and book format. Once I'm done with that search and I've collected the data that I want to start over and allow the users to clear those text boxes to begin a new search. So when I click the Clear Search Box button, I get the search box that you see. Basically in a start over position where it appears as though it was before we even started the first search. The coding for this was actually quite simple. As you can see, I have 1 line for each text box and combo box, and I just set the .visible property to false, and then close the form and reopen it. This process effectively returns the form to its initial opened look and makes it ready for the next search. Initiating the search is a matter of clicking the button that's at the top on the left of the form. That button then executes the code and pulls the data off the form and builds the SQL code in the query. So let's see how that works. The first thing we do is set up. There you see on the screen, I'm setting up the DAO and the query def variable. The next are the string variables that we need in order to hold the SQL and then set them to 0 to make sure that there wasn't any extraneous data that was still in the form from the last time. The next thing we do is to close Query Inventory 2, which is the name of the query that I'm working on. I'm going to close that first just to make sure that if the user didn't close it, that it closed before the code tried to rewrite it. Now, this is important because if it's not closed, we can try to recreate the new query, but it won't take unless the query is closed. It's just like any other document. When you try to rename it or move it on your hard drive, you can't do that until it's closed at the time you actually try to move or rename it. The next thing I'm going to do is to set all of the static SQL code right now. SQL main is everything before the where statement, and SQL order by is everything after the where clause. Now, this is set at the very beginning because it doesn't change, and then we can tack them on when the where clause is completely assembled. The next piece of it is a series of if-then-else statements. These if-then-else statements first check to see if there's a value in the first text box for the search. Now, this is important because of the syntax of the first where statement is different from the second and subsequent where statements. The second and subsequent where statements have an and in front of them, where the first one does not. So the first one has to have a value in it. The other ones can have a value or not, and I've taken care of making sure that if a user doesn't put a value in it or just blanks it out because they don't want to use it or restart all over, the user can do that and not receive an error. So if it doesn't have a value, it's going to go to a terminate label that we have at the end of the program with a message box that comes up that says the first search box requires a value. Now, once we've done that, I'm going to go into here, and if you remember when you looked at the screen, it was author last name that was in our first text box. So this select case statement is going to go through that until it gets to the author last name, and it's going to assign that to SQL 1 along with the value of the text box SQL code and assign it to SQL 1. Now, SQL 1 is labeled SQL 1 because there's a SQL 2 through SQL 8 as well. Those numbers allow us to put the SQL in a specific order that they're labeled on the form. Now, like I said, the second and subsequent values don't necessarily have to be in order, but having them in order just makes the code a lot simpler when we get to the bottom and we're assembling it all together. The second and subsequent if-then-else statements look like this. The first piece up there is still going to check to see if there's a value. If there's not a value in that particular one, it's just going to bypass the select case statement and move to the next one. If it finds a value in the search criteria, it's going to go into the select case statements and assign the appropriate SQL code to SQL 2. And this continues to the next select case statement until it gets all the way through SQL 8. Now at the end, we compile the SQL code. And the SQL variable that we're assigning it to is sUltimateFilter. Now you can see the SQL main at the beginning and the SQL order by at the end. The where clause is assembled in the middle, starting with the where keyword, and then SQL 1, 2, 3, all the way until we get to 8. And then closing it out with a closed parentheses. Now you can see that it assembles quickly. Then I'm going to delete the query definition and then rebuild it. That way it blanks out completely out. Then I assign the sUltimateFilter code to the qdflookup.sql. After that, it's done, and I just follow it by a do command.openQuery, and we open the query inventory 2 once again. So let's take a quick look at how it works. So I'm going to run a quick query here and then start by entering the author's last name. Now I'm going to take author's first name of Stephen. Then I'm going to go down and look for book format because I only want hardback copies of the books for my library. So we put in hardcover. Now I'm going to go and look at the age range because I want the age range to be adult. Now, I don't think Stephen King wrote any kids' books, but I'm going to search for that anyway. Now, the book series I want is The Dark Tower. We hit the initiate button and we can see that we only have 3 books. The Dark Tower, The Song of Susanna, and The Wolves of Calla. All hardback, all adult books, and all in the series of the Dark Tower. So you can see how it functions, and we can take and add search boxes. We can remove them. We can go back and forth. We can rebuild the query any way we want. It's very flexible. So I really appreciate you watching. If you found value in this video, please hit that like button and let's go get it out to more people. Consider subscribing, and we'll continue to put out good, valuable lessons in the future. So I hope to see you again. Thanks.